This is David Livingstone. David Livingstone is famous as a missionary, a medical doctor, an explorer, an anti-slavery campaigner, and for being one of the leading humans out of Europe, the Western civilization, to actually explore the interior of Africa. When he was asked one time why he did what he did, he said, "I was compelled by the love of Christ." He's Scottish, so he was born in Scotland, and that little red arrow points to where his hometown was. It's a suburb of Glasgow, and right down almost on the border with England. And he was in a poor family, had 4 siblings. When he was 10 years old, he went to work. The Industrial Revolution is starting now. This is 1813 when he was born. So in the 1800s, steam engines being invented. Suddenly we have a way to make things move using heat. Before that, fire had been valuable for a long time, but for not making anything move, other than if you took a burning stick and made the little donkey turn in the grain wheel go faster. But suddenly when you could use fire to make steam and use that to push things in a way that worked, you could start building big factories. Now this mill he's working in here is probably too early for a steam power. It's down on a river, as typical. Go out to East Athens and look at the old mill areas down there, and or out to the old YMCA camp and look at the dam there. You don't have to dam up the water very far to get some wheels in there and get some real power out of it, and to run belts all through factories on the banks of a river, and mills they called them. And so he went to work in the mill on a cotton treadle. A treadle implies some kind of foot power, doesn't it? Isn't that what that means, like on a sewing machine? But this is like a spinning wheel, but a more faster working one. You could work with foot power probably if it was called a treadle, or maybe they just continued calling it that. And he would be manning one of those machines all day for 14 hours, and then go to school for 2 hours. And he saved up his money the first week. Well, it wasn't hard, didn't get paid till the end of the week. And he bought a Latin book so he could do his homework. So this was probably not completely his initiative. His initiative, or his parents, was to get in school and be doing it, and he needed that book. And so he bought that book so he could bring it and keep it on the treadle. And somehow he's doing his job while he's flipping the pages and getting his homework done. If you're working 14 hours before you go to school, when else are you going to do your homework and learn all those Latin words that he was trying to learn? So he was mission oriented. I mean, he had an idea what he wanted to do. And by 1821, which is for him, born in 1813, he's only 8 years old at that time, right? He has received Christ and basically dedicated himself to spreading the word of Christ's grace as a missionary. And he decides by the time it's time for him to go to college that he had a deal with his employer. Obviously the employer wasn't upset with him reading this book while he's supposed to be doing his job. He wasn't screwing it up too bad, because he was very happy with him doing that and letting him then start having 6 months off of the job to go to school, back to the job for 6 months. And so he's working his way through college by working for 6 months and then going to school for 6 months and trying to get it done as fast as he can. And he's studying medicine and theology at Glasgow. And luckily Glasgow is just like a suburb. His little town is a suburb of Glasgow. And so at some point, he hears one of the missionaries put out by the London Missionary Society down into South Africa has come back and has given a talk. And he hears this guy talk, and he talks to him personally a time or two, Robert Moffat. And Moffat's talking about getting into South Africa and just starting a mission there for the natives. And he talked about 1,000 campfires 1,000 villages. The smoke, I can see the smoke to the north of 1,000 villages we haven't reached. And just the powerful message about being able to reach those people really resonated with David Livingstone. And so he got in touch with the London Missionary Society, and they basically hired him on and sent him down there to go to Moffat's mission. Now, to understand the amazingness of what he did, and when others had not even been there before, we kind of have to look at a little bit of the geography, the topography here. That's a map of Africa showing where the countries are, and there's South Africa. Cape Town's right down there on the tip on the Atlantic side, and up all the way up here is the Congo, and the Congo River circles through there and comes out the mouth of the Congo. Way back 10 years before Columbus, Diego Sao, I think he's a Portuguese or a Spanish explorer, had put an outpost down at the mouth of the Nile there, but they had not really gone upriver very far. And Europeans had been traveling prior to Columbus around Africa, over to India and the Orient, and trading. And what was Columbus's great idea? I think the earth is round. If we go this way, we can get there quicker. And it took him, I guess, more than a few weeks to figure out he wasn't in India. But and that led to all those explorers trying to get through North America, find a water route. Water is, we think of it as a barrier today, I guess, but when it really comes to transporting things, and in those days, water's a highway. And so all the French are all poking around up in Canada trying to find a way through, and Magellan actually got his ship around the southern end of South America, and Panama Canal hadn't been built yet, but some people carried stuff across that isthmus and got on the other side. So we're looking for water passages. So eventually what Livingstone does is start looking for the waterways to get to the interior of Africa, because we had not been there yet. With trading posts all around the coast here, 1482 being one of the main ones, but not going up the mouth of the Congo. Suddenly he's down there, and he had to set out from the coast to go find the mission station. This is actually a satellite photo with all the writing. The writing is not there for the satellite camera to get it, but so it gives you an idea of the topography here. You see the green in here. The equator runs right through the Congo, and along the equator of the world, we see Brazil, the Amazon rainforest. We see this big rainforest, and we see in Southeast Asia and Borneo and Indonesia that rainforest. You get out a little bit further from that, you get into what's called a moist forest, more of a normal place like we live, north and south of the equator. The circulation of the air around the Earth as it rotates and all the weather patterns develop and interact just seems to consistently maintain these weather patterns. You get past that and you get a band north of the equator and an equal distance south of the equator of deserts. There's the Great Sahara Desert. You go over here, and there's the Arabian Desert. Come back to our country, and right in line with that is the western United States area that we would consider to be the Great American Desert. And then equidistant south, down here in South Africa, we're getting a piece of that right here. So he lands here. He treks 600 miles up to the coast. I mean, up to the top of South Africa. Oops, hang on here. What did we just do? Almost up to the border with Botswana. And he works at that mission station with Robert Moffat, and eventually they actually, he marries Robert Moffat's daughter, Mary, and then they actually establish another mission station on up further into Botswana. So they're getting a little deeper into Africa. So they get up into Botswana, and by he is up there in Botswana, and they're working with the natives. He's a doctor, so he's got all kinds of things he can do to help these people. I just can't imagine what the language barrier must have been like in getting something started like this and being a missionary in a place like this. But he would also just try to use European technology and implements and his knowledge just to help them in every way possible and to teach them about Jesus. And that was the important thing, to teach them about Jesus. But when trouble happened, he would get in the middle of it. We just think about it. His name's David. He was probably named after the David of the Bible. But from what I've read, trying to find out about David Livingstone, David of the Bible was pretty crazy. He went out there with that slingshot after Goliath. But this David, a little bit crazier, I think. They were having trouble with a lion that was, well, lions, but one in particular, that was eating the sheep. One account said the cattle, but two accounts I read said the sheep. So they were eating the sheep. And so he's out trying to help them get rid of this lion. One day the natives are hollering that the lion is out. He's gotten one of the sheep already. So David Livingstone grabs, well, there's his rifle right there. It's a double-barrel flintlock. The technology of the time, by then we had better than flintlocks. The war between the states was fought with percussion caps instead of flintlocks. But he had a big old double-barrel flintlock. Where you've got to have a piece of flint clamped into the hammer, and it has to fly forward and scrape a metal striker, and make sparks. And those sparks have to fall in a little pan and light that powder, and then that powder fire spreads through the little hole into the barrel and ignites the pile of powder that's right behind that big old ball, and hopefully shoots something. And so for big game hunting in Africa, where the thing you're trying to shoot can kill you pretty quick if you don't hit him, having a double-barrel flintlock, which is the first time I'd ever heard of that, was probably a pretty good idea. And he shot that lion with both. He hit the lion with both. But it didn't kill the lion fast enough. So the lion came and jumped on him. This is a pretty good rendition of what probably happened. I couldn't find the actual photos. They didn't. I had heard that in Africa, places that have never had a telephone system can get it quick now in the last couple of decades by using cell phones and forgetting landlines. Don't even go through the landline process. So people over there were getting cell phones as fast as people over here, but these people didn't have theirs with them. So the lion got him and got his left shoulder in his jaws, bit through, splintered the bone, it said. He was about to be dead, and one of his native helpers and followers they're all trying to help him. He fired his flintlock, and it didn't twice, and it didn't work. Neither side fired a bullet. So then the lion jumps and goes for him and jumps on him and starts biting on him, and one of these others came with a spear and stabbed the lion, or tried to, and the lion jumped on him. And luckily, the effect of his two bullets, David's two bullets, killed the lion at that point. The lion bled out and fell dead. And he said that during that experience, when he was really getting eaten, he was close to a Jonah experience, except with a land animal. He said the pain, it was a horrible feeling when the lion first jumped him and bit him, and the pain was unbelievable. He said, but almost instantly there was no more pain and no more worry. He didn't attribute that to his own personal faith in God being better than other people's. He just said that it was, as a medical doctor, it was such an astounding discovery that he thinks that in God's providence he's made all animals that way, so that the animals that have to get eaten by other animals don't have to suffer when they're being eaten. So, from that station, after he recovered, he decided that the smokes from the north, finding the rest of these people in this vast unexplored continent, was something super important. So, rather than staying put in that mission station and just doing what they had done for about 7 or 8 years, he headed north to explore, looking for what he decided would be the headwaters of the Nile River, to open up the interior of Africa to communication, Christianity, and commerce. He was seeing that as a way to really upgrade the lives of these people. Number one, Christianity, a saving knowledge of Christ is ultra important, not only for the future, but for happiness on earth now. But in terms of the way they lived, and just basically a subsistence survival state, having commerce and being able to get trade with the Europeans and the technology they had could better their lives so much. That was his motivation. And so he sets out, how do you set out over land if you haven't found that river? And he's thinking that the Nile, which is famous through many centuries of human history up in the Western world, that we knew about the Nile. If he could find the headwaters of the Nile, then he could kind of see how we could travel back and forth. And nobody had ever come up the Nile to find it. Not only is it upstream, which you can do. How did Lewis and Clark explore the Louisiana Purchase? They headed out with canoes. And with canoes, you get on the rivers, and you start paddling. You can paddle upstream in a canoe. There are not that many rivers that are so fast you can't paddle upstream in a canoe, and you can pull over to the shore and rest when you need to. And when you get to things that are barriers, like rapids or waterfalls, a waterfall is just a really abrupt rapid, I say. But a rapids or a waterfall, it's not safe to traverse in your canoe. Canoes you can carry. So you'd get out with 3 or 4 people per canoe. You can carry that canoe around the obstacle, get back in the water, and keep going. If you're trying to do that with any larger ships and a lot more stuff you're carrying, it can get a little bit difficult. Downstream or upstream, if you've got those barriers. So a lot of this travel had to be over land to try to find the origin of the Nile, he's thinking. He eventually finds the Congo is what happens, but they haven't thought about the Congo yet. They're still thinking Nile, but it didn't matter. It was the same principle. If you could open this thing up to Christianity and commerce for these people. And this is kind of what it looked like. Here's what you do when you travel that way. You've got porters carrying stuff. I remember I watched Rama the Jungle was a show on TV when I was a kid, and you got to learn a little bit about what it was like in this hot rainforest jungle and traveling. And these people were getting paid a little bit. You know, they were very glad to do it for the money or the knives or whatever you could trade with them that was worth something to them. And at one point, and I'll talk about in a few minutes how he actually tried to go sell a boat in India to pay the porters he owed some money to. Here's what it looks like when they're crossing water. Just wade on across. And here's what it would look like. One source attributed this photo or picture to Henry Stanley, who actually came and found Livingstone later in Africa. But it says Livingstone right on the side of the boat. This is a sectional boat. If they weren't using something larger than canoes, this was new to me, they could actually have this sectional boat. Here's the bow, there's a space in there, there's the middle, and there's another middle part, and there's a stern, I guess, back there somewhere. So that boat is actually unboltable into sections that could be carried by enough porters to get around things like waterfalls and rapids to go somewhere on a river. So that's what it kind of looked like as he was traveling these places. And also, just a side note I saw somewhere is that he got himself a sextant. This is what they use on ships, and when I was in the Air Force, I took every navigation course they would give at Air Force Academy because it was fun. And we'd get to go out and fly at night or day and take one of these things and try to figure out where we were on the face of the earth by sighting at celestial bodies. And the measurement you're taking is the altitude angle. What is the angle up in the sky of that at this moment, with a watch set to the nearest second being kind of important because they're continuing to rotate pretty fast, 1,000 miles an hour. So you want to be to the second right on your time and your calculations. You sight through the little telescope thingy there, and you see the planet or the moon limb that you're looking for. Or in the daytime, it's got to be the sun. And so there's little magnifying glasses here and filters. You don't want to look through that thing directly at the sun. So he got to South Africa on a ship, so he had time. He was a curious fellow, and so I imagine he was out with those Navy guys learning how to use the sextant, and he got himself one, and he carried it on these treks and used it as a land-based instrument of navigation to sight the sun and see where he was in terms of longitude and latitude and keep his notes. Because, wow, if you're going to spend 20 years looking for the source of the Nile in the middle of nowhere like that, over thousands and thousands of miles of territory, you'd want to keep a record so you didn't have to duplicate your effort later. He ended up, in trying to find the source of the Nile, going not only just the first 600 miles inland to the kind of arid area there, and then another several hundred miles further into Botswana, but all the way up into these lakes. Call this the Great Lake region here. Well, if this is the equator, and the penguins are right there, that's a good trip. That is quite a walk. He must have gotten one of those watches and gotten into a contest with somebody, because he was winning that contest. He discovered this little Nyaya, Lake Nyaya, a long one right there. Lake Tanganyika is a little further up there. Lake Victoria is up there. There's the Congo. And he's up there, in the middle of the Congo, finally, having found these lakes and these waters and these lakes. And eventually they did discover that the source of the Nile is Lake Victoria. Or if you want to stretch it a little bit, there's a little river down here that feeds into Lake Victoria, therefore it counts also as water that goes to the Egyptian delta up there into the Mediterranean. But he never found that connection exactly. He ends up finding what he thought was the mouth of the Nile a little further west in the Congo. Wasn't called the Congo then. Most of these places didn't have names at that point. And he, at that point, has an experience that really, really awakens him to what's going on in terms of slavery here in Africa at that point. The Arab slave traders had been doing this trade since 600 AD. So it had been going on for a lot of centuries. And Zanzibar is a port down here on the shores of Mozambique that is where they were using, up here, Tanzania. Zanzibar is in Tanzania. And they were trekking in and basically raiding and taking prisoners. I don't know if they were getting the slaves from other Africans who kidnapped other Africans, probably partly, but they were also directly going in and doing raids and kidnapping and taking people as slaves. When he reached this river right about here that he thought was the headwaters of the Nile, there was suddenly a massacre. The Arab slave traders were herding thousands of screaming, running, diving into the river to try to swim away Africans who they were just shooting. Here's where I kind of gathered that David Livingstone was not a pacifist. He said he was about to use his pistol and see how many he could kill of those Arab slave traders. But he said that he had a duty to his group, his people, not to get them all killed, which is what would have happened. So, and another commentator I read that had studied Livingstone's life said that he used the word duty a lot. He really felt like duty was something sacred. And when you have a duty to do something, you do it and you do it well. So he backtracked a little to the east, over to the other side of Lake Tanganyika, to a little village, and settled in there. He was still, he said, neighbors with some Arab slave traders. He said, by that time they knew who I was and what I was doing. They knew I didn't like what they were doing, but they tolerated me anyway. And he said, I really felt like he was really feeling at that time that the biggest thing he needed to accomplish by getting people in there into the middle of Africa to bring commerce, Christianity, and communication was to get rid of the slave trade in there also. So he had only backed away. His wife had died then on this trip, not too long before this. So she had passed away, and some of the other people too. The conditions were terrible. Just another one of the little things that he seemed to have done is to have been a leader in finding out that quinine could counteract malaria, because people would die like crazy in going into Africa and getting bit by mosquitoes and get malaria, and you just died from it. The United States saw that when we were building the Panama Canal. And so Livingstone was kind of a leader in that. He was having health problems. His arm always hurt him and was not fully functional where the lion had bit him. And so he's back at this little village on the other side of Lake Tanganyika. And by this time, he's been on this trek about 12 years. And 5 years of that, the last 5 years, he hadn't communicated with people back home. The London Missionary Society and he had parted ways when he set out on this expedition. They didn't agree with him using their sponsorship to go walking and looking for rivers. They wanted him to stay put in a mission station and do the work there. So he parted ways with them. And within a year, the London Geographical Society had heard what he was up to, and they started sponsoring him to find the source of the Nile, one of the holy grails of exploration at that time that they hadn't found yet. And so he was doing that under their auspices, but not getting great support. He did not have a lot of resources showing up, and like I mentioned at one point, he got his porters. He went back to the coast to sell a boat to pay his porters. He owed money from about a year's worth. He felt like that was a duty. He owed them money. When you look at those pictures of those porters, you start thinking, well, he was a slaver himself. Well, no, all those people, just because they had black skin and were carrying all the stuff on their heads for him, didn't mean they were slaves. They wanted those jobs, and for a lot of reasons, and one being monetary. They're going to get paid something, and he owed them, and he felt like he needed to pay them back wages for this year. And he tried to sell the boat he had bought back to the seller, and they wouldn't give him enough money to pay what he needed to pay to his porters. So he said, we're going to get a better price on this boat. And he sailed it to India with a bunch of his porters as the crew. And none of them had ever done that before. I mean, he must have paid good attention with that sexton on board that ship that got him South Africa back and forth a time or two. And so they actually got over to India and sold the boat, but not enough money, so he paid them as much as he could, and they came back with him. And it was kind of obvious throughout this that whenever he had a problem, the natives there really liked him. They really felt loyal to him. They felt like he was somebody they needed to help as much as he was helping them. So the New York Herald sent out a reporter, a Welsh American. He had fought in the war between the states on both sides. I've read a little account of how some Southern soldiers got captured by the Yankees, and one option to not be in a horrible prisoner of war camp in the North was to work for them, take a job, be in the Northern Army. I'm not sure they put him in combat jobs, but he ended up doing some of that, fighting for the North and the South. Henry Stanley had gotten a look at what slavery was like and what had happened to it in the United States at that time. So just not that many years after the war between the states, he is suddenly going as a reporter from the New York Herald, well financed, to go look for Livingstone. And it's a great story for the New York Herald. They're putting out a weekly edition of what's happened this week. So he's sending dispatches back, and he's got a lot of porters with good equipment and good clothing and lots of help. And he's carrying all kinds of supplies to give to Livingstone if he's there and needs it and is still alive, or to maybe find Livingstone's body and come back with a report that, yes, he did die, like some people are thinking. It's got to be the case. We hadn't heard from him in 5 years. Who would live in that kind of situation for 1 year, much less 5? And he's been there, at least doing this trek, for 12 years. So does anybody know what Mr. Henry Stanley said to Mr. Livingstone when he... Yeah. This is the famous Dr. Livingstone, I presume. There's Henry Stanley and there's Dr. Livingstone. He's looking a lot fresher than Dr. Livingstone at this point. And one of Livingstone's helpers had come running saying, many people on the road, many people coming this way, many people coming this way. And they showed up with an American flag flying. He had never seen that before. It looks like from this that we were, one picture I saw, this has got, no, this has got extras. We were still trying to add stripes to match the number of stars at that point. Yes?
Stanley was also in the war between the states before he came to Africa.
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm. And somehow fought on both sides. I don't know which one first. Probably the South first, if he ended up with the North after that. So Stanley told Livingstone, he said, they became real friends real fast, and they were in perfect agreement on the goals of Livingstone's life, really, to help the natives. And Stanley gave Livingstone the supplies to keep and went back without him because Livingstone said, I'm not done yet. Even though he's in bad health and he's hurt, and he still wants to complete the job. He still wants to find, he has a duty to find the source of the river that empties into the ocean. And so he gives some information to Stanley to go back and find that place where the slave massacre ran him off, and get back in that river and go downstream and see if he comes out in Egypt. And he didn't. He came out at the mouth of the Congo. And so Henry Stanley basically finished the job that Livingstone was trying to do, to find a river with an outlet to the ocean that would allow exploration of the interior of Africa. And he sent back from the coast more supplies and porters. He sent porters back. He hired porters and sent them back to Livingstone, and Livingstone set out again. But within about the next year, Livingstone's still looking for the source of the Nile, since he found out this was not really the Nile, it was the Congo. He said, well, I'll keep looking for the source of the Nile. He was getting pretty darn close. He was up there near Lake Victoria. He had discovered Victoria Falls and named that after Queen Victoria. He's famous for that. He had gone from the west coast of Africa to the east coast of Africa before any European had really gone into the interior of Africa. He had walked 30,000 miles. So he had done a lot more than just be an on-the-spot preacher in a missionary station. And his goal was to really open this up so others could do even more. He passed away within the year, and he was at prayer. The natives wanted to bring his body back to England. They really liked him. They wanted a grave of him for themselves, so they kept his heart and buried it. And they didn't have the same kind of embalming equipment we have today. They mummified him, probably used salt, and got his body back. Probably didn't look very recognizable, but so when they got it back to England, they could look at the bones in his left shoulder and say, yeah, that's him. So he gets buried at Westminster Abbey. Now, anybody familiar with who you've got to be to get get a vault at Westminster Abbey? You know, that's royalty, and this is the same British government that just months prior was not giving him enough money or a support to do what he was trying to do. Although, based on what Stanley saw and heard about that slave massacre, and Livingstone getting that word back in that way, and Livingstone himself in his writings getting word back about the slave trade, they actually got enough people, got an activist organization going in England to do something about that, got Parliament to pass a resolution, and England told the Sultan, who was in charge of all this Arab slave trade through Zanzibar, that this is going to stop now or we will blockade Zanzibar and you're done. And it says that stopped it. Well, that stopped that trade at that time in that place. It didn't completely stop. It's still happening today. But here's his epitaph. says, brought by faithful hands over land and sea, here rests David Livingstone, missionary, traveler, philanthropist, born March 19, 1813, in Blantyre, Lancashire, Scotland. Died May 1st, 1873, at Chitabo's village, Ulala. For 30 years, his life was spent. Oops, do we have the rest of this? Well, it goes on to say how he spent his life as a medical doctor, a missionary, and fighting for an end to slavery. A couple of quotes that kind of say something about his reasoning, his character, why he was doing what he was doing. What are my quotes here? He said, God, send me anywhere, only go with me. Lay any burden on me, only sustain me. And sever any tie in my heart, except to the tie that binds my heart to yours. Another time he said, I will place no value on anything I have or may possess except in relation to the kingdom of Christ. And then without Christ, not one step with him anywhere.